this video, I'm going to provide an overview of a really interesting article, probably the best I've read all year, and that is on the 10 breakthrough technologies of 2026 as described in the MIT Technology Review. I'll leave a link in the description for anyone who wants to read it. And the aim of this is sort of twofold. Number one, I just want to provide an overview of the technology that is discussed and how it relates into how a university student or college student could build that into a project for a portfolio, and then that's with the goal of maybe like adding that to your resume or a college application. Then the second aim of the video is sort of to discuss how that technology fits into the broader landscape of venture capital and deep tech. So the article sort of breaks down, provides an overview of 5 different domains: climate change, energy, artificial intelligence, biotech, and space, and how that fits within deep tech. Deep tech just refers to any technology that is sort of based on a proprietary innovation or discovery, usually in a scientific lab or elsewhere. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first one that is discussed is sodium-ion batteries. So a sodium-ion battery is just a rechargeable battery that uses sodium or salt-based materials of lithium to store electrical energy. How does it work? I'll provide a diagram here. Sodium ions move around between an anode and cathode, which have opposite charges, and then just like lithium ions do in conventional batteries, you have a charge and discharge sequence. It's very similar chemistry, but the sodium is actually far more abundant and cheaper. And that's actually a good point. That relates to a second angle. So I remember once I looked at a project called technology called DLE, direct lithium extraction, and basically the whole point of it is that lithium, which is a really important mineral, is quite scarce. So a lot of investment and resources are attributed to sort of getting hold of lithium to put into batteries. Sodium-ion batteries here are sort of, if it works, a really nice alternative because obviously sodium is more abundant than lithium. So if you're interested in another side project, look into DLE, direct lithium extraction, and then you could do a project analyzing the status quo, because usually lithium is extracted, I think, using something called evaporation ponds. I'll do a video on it, but it's quite time intensive. But there are new, really advanced technologies like MOF, metal organic frameworks, which can quickly extract the ions in a shorter time period. Okay, so that's sort of the first technology, sodium-ion batteries. What is a project idea? Here's just one. Can sodium-ion batteries outperform lithium-ion batteries for stationary energy storage? That's a great project you could do. Now, sort of the second angle I want to look at is sort of the venture capital startup angle. For example, an obvious application of this would be maybe grid-level energy storage, maybe for urban areas, and then you can make something called like a hybrid play. So a hybrid system is basically where you have a renewable energy source, maybe solar energy, and then you pair it with an energy storage technology like a battery. Okay, so that's the easy play you could go through here. And then the investors in this space, a really big one is Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Actually, when I was in investing, I think one of our portfolio companies had a contract with a portfolio company of Breakthrough Energy Ventures. I think they're one of the largest energy investment funds in the world. And then another one is Lower Carbon Capital as well. Okay? All right, the next part, or the next technology that is covered is something called generative coding. And this relates to artificial intelligence. The article says AI coding tools are revolutionizing how we write, test, and deploy code, making it easier and faster to build sophisticated website, games, and other applications than ever before. Just be sure to double check what they come up with. Okay, so how does it work? Okay, so you guys have probably heard of an LLM by now. I mean, we use it every day with ChatGPT. A large language model is trained on billions of lines of code, and it basically just looks for patterns in programming languages. And when you give it a prompt, so basically when you type into ChatGPT, it could sort of predict and generate the most likely code sequence. That is a breakdown of it. How does that relate into deep tech? There's sort of 2 domains. There's sort of the artificial intelligence domain, and then sort of how it relates to actual developer tools. And there's actually a company, I think they got acquired by SpaceX. I think it's called Cursor AI, and they basically are really one of of the best examples of sort of innovation in the LLM and AI space. Definitely something to look into as well. Here's this idea for a project as a student. Can AI generate an engineering simulation as effectively as a human programmer? Then how does that relate to sort of the startup venture capital world? A really big trend I've seen is something called AI coding co-pilots, or just co-pilots in general. And I think, in my opinion, I predict that co-pilots will be, out of this current AI era, I think that will be one of the winning investment verticals, because a co-pilot is there to basically guide you along the way. And this relates to a project we're working on right now in our Imperial Edge Startup Accelerator. One of our students, I was speaking with him the other day, and he's building an agri-tech project. And we actually did some customer research, and he actually spoke to people who work in the agriculture industry, and it became apparent that they do want greater insights into, basically improving their day-to-day operations, but they don't want to basically have their toes stepped on, for lack of a better term. So how does that relate to co-pilots? It means that the customer, the market, wants a technology to help improve what they're doing, but not take over what they're doing. That's basically what a co-pilot is. And you can build one with an abundance of tools you have available, no-code tools, Claude, etc. So I think that's super interesting. Some of the biggest investors in AI will come up a lot in this video. A16Z, Sequoia Capital, really big ones. Okay, the next one is actually one of my favorite domains, and that relates to climate change and energy, and the third technology listed is next-gen nuclear. The article says nuclear power already provides steady electricity to grids around the world without producing any greenhouse gas emissions. New nuclear reactor designs rely on alternative fuels and cooling systems, will take up less space, which could get more reactors online faster. Now, this relates to, I don't think the company's around anymore, but I think what they were doing was pretty revolutionary. I think they were maybe just a bit too early, or maybe they didn't manage their cash effectively. But there was a startup back in the day called Transatomic, and they were probably one of the best innovators I've seen in the nuclear space. I think their website is still live, but that is just an example of how the nuclear industry is transitioning towards smaller, safer, and cheaper methods. I feel like there's a lot of stigma attached with nuclear, obviously, because of things like Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island, but there's been actually a lot of improvement in this space. Having actually worked in energy investing, I can tell you that one thing that sort of holds back nuclear projects is, one, the long commissioning timelines, and two, just the costs can really blow out of proportion if not careful. However, I would sort of preface, or the counter argument to that would be like, look what China's doing. China has launched a multitude of nuclear reactor plants over the past decade, and the West seems to be pretty slow with it. So you can make of that what you will. Now, how does how does this sort of next-gen nuclear work? As mentioned, it's basically focused on improving safety and reducing costs while generating electricity through nuclear fission. Any physics student should know what nuclear fission is. How does that relate within deep tech? So it sort of is at the intersection of energy and climate tech, obviously because it produces less greenhouse gas emissions, and it's you could say a cleaner form of energy as well. Who are some interesting investors in this space? Breakthrough Energy Ventures and Founders Fund. What is a project you could do as a student? For example, can small modular reactors decarbonize industrial heat production? And just as a side point, decarbonizing industrial processes is one of the biggest investment opportunities I think out there right now. I actually worked on a project once related to solid state energy conversion with the focus of decarbonizing an industrial process. And one thing I could tell you is that investors, and when we pitch to venture capital funds, they love the idea, but just a little thing you have to be aware of is sort of there are a lot of technological barriers there. So a lot of industrial decarbonization methods are very attractive on the surface, and they can get funded maybe through to seed, Series A, but then eventually you'll have to prove fourth technology here is something called AI companions. This relates to artificial intelligence. Every day, millions of people interact with AI chatbots. Some of them form what feel like close personal bonds with the bots. There's mounting evidence that this can be dangerous, and politicians are finally waking up. Yeah, I actually agree. I think this is actually a really interesting project for maybe any social sciences or humanities student. So I'm actually going to not do a STEM angle on this one. If I was someone doing maybe sociology or psychology, I would put together a paper and do a lot of primary quantitative research studying the relationships, you could say, that are being formed by the younger gen and their AI models. It's actually, you could say, it's pretty dystopian and scary, sort of what's happening, but I think it would do society a lot of benefit for us to get a better understanding of like how humans are sort of like gravitated towards AI to sort of like supplement or fill the gap of loneliness in their life. I think that would be an excellent excellent project for anyone who's interested in sociology, psychology, social sciences, just anything that isn't STEM. I think that's excellent to study. All right, the fifth thing the article mentions actually relates to biotech, and this is called base editing a baby. It says when he was just 7 months old, baby KJ became the first person to receive a personalized gene editing treatment. Clinical trial is now planned, and bespoke gene editing drugs could be approved within the next few years. Okay, so how does this work? So I'm going to have to do a whole other video on this. Unlike traditional CRISPR, CRISPR, base editing directly swaps one DNA base for another without cutting the DNA strand, reducing unintended mutations. I've been saying this for a while. I will do a series breaking down biotech because that is a whole thing unto itself, and we have several biotech students on our AI accelerator, and I feel like it will be good as well for them to get some knowledge on that. How does this relate to deep tech domains? One is obviously biotechnology, and also the second is genetic engineering. What's an interesting project for any biology student? Can base editing become a cure for rare inherited diseases? That's an amazing question. How does this relate to startup venture capital angle? A few companies innovating in this space are developing something called AI-assisted gene therapy design platforms. I was actually speaking to a student the other day about maybe building a platform similar to that. I don't want to say too much because we're still scoping it out, but interesting investors in this space are Arch Venture Partners, Flagship Pioneering as well. Also, anyone who's interested in biotech, I would strongly recommend you look into long-only biotech funds. Some of the investments they make into pioneering drug companies is fascinating, and it's a great alternative route if you don't want to spend your career in a lab. Maybe going to investing in the labs is a good idea as well. Okay, the next thing in the article is related to some in biotechnology again. It says gene resurrection. It says growing banks of gene information on extinct creatures are providing clues to new treatment and suggesting solutions to climate change and may help save endangered species. Okay, so how does this work? So the scientist sequences DNA from preserved remains. They identify missing genes, but then edit living relatives to express extinct characteristics. This is super advanced, and I think anyone who's interested in biology, medicine, molecular biology, whether that be at undergrad or postgrad, should start looking into this. How could this be a project? Could de-extinction help combat biodiversity loss? That's a fascinating question. That's sort of borderline like a sci-fi movie, kind of. How does that relate to startups and venture capital? Some interesting startup angles could be conservation genetics and biodiversity technology. Interesting investors in this space include Draper Associates. All right, number 7, I'm going to try to get through this, relates to artificial intelligence. It says mechanistic interpretability. The article says nobody knows exactly how large language models work, which means we don't have a clear idea of their limitations. That's true. However, that is changing with clever research techniques that are giving us a glimpse into what's really going on inside the black box. This sort of relates to the whole really big discussion right now on AI safety. Anthropic, the company who created the AI model Claude, have been big proponents of AI safety. They're sort of you can say it's a battle in the AI world. Some people and investors as well are pushing more for maybe deregulation and less of a focus or emphasis on safety. I just want to focus on improving the capabilities of AI, whereas other companies and stakeholders, government officials are pushing for more safety and regulation. Where you sit in that debate is really up to you, but it's something really interesting to look at. What is an interesting startup angle? I think this would be really interesting for any sort of financial or financial banking angle as well, and that would be AI auditing and compliance software. You want to go look at industry verticals or applications where safety is really important, so you want to mitigate against hacking or AI agents going rogue. So I think that's super interesting as well. Number 8, this one is actually one of my favorite fields, and that is related to space. It says here commercial space stations. Space tourism may seem fanciful, but this might be the year paying customers can finally check into a room with a galactic view. The shiny new modules will also support research missions by scientists and space agencies. Space tech is probably one of the biggest areas of venture capital investment right now. And investment in general. SpaceX just went public, right? How does this work? So companies launch modular habitats into orbit that can host astronauts, scientists, and commercial customers independently of government programs. And that's sort of a trend we've seen over the past couple of decades, the shift of the space industry away from government or public sector funding into the private sector. Very interesting. How does this relate within deep tech? It is at the intersection of space technologies and aerospace. A really simple project you could do is just asking the question, is commercial space research economically viable? That's more of maybe, I guess, a business investment angle. There's also a really interesting company, a venture capital fund that is a specialist in space tech investment called Seraphim Capital. Really interesting fund, you should check them out. Okay. Second last is number 9, related to biotechnology, and that is embryo scoring. Okay, it says here, screening embryos for genetic diseases is relatively common practice in fertility clinics today, and it can give potential parents some peace of mind. Now, new startups are making bold claims about using similar techniques to predict certain traits, including intelligence. This is fascinating. So how would this work? So an algorithm would analyze genetic information and developmental characteristics to estimate the likelihood of successful implantation or disease risk. Where does this fit within deep tech? This is at the intersection of biotechnology and healthcare, or AI for healthcare. A simple question you can ask for a research project would be, can AI improve IVF success rates? And I actually posted a video on this on our TikTok recently, specifically for young ladies interested in STEM related to IVF and fertility technologies, so check that out. Some interesting investors in this space are Coastal Ventures and General Catalyst. Oh, by the way, we actually did a full breakdown on our TikTok of femtech. So femtech is just an industry that focuses on technologies to improve women's health. I will try to do a YouTube video that sort of puts all of that together, but an interesting startup angle you could go with here would be AI fertility diagnostics, something that's very interesting. Lastly, number 10 in the article, this relates to the artificial intelligence domain, and this is hyperscale AI data centers. You may have heard of the term hyperscalers before. I'm going to do a video breaking down what AI actually is and the different layers of the AI stack, because you guys may have heard, you use ChatGPT every day, but that's just sort of the end product of it. There's a lot that goes into that, and I'll come back to this article, but quickly, we worked on an investment once in a company that was developing cabling solutions for data centers as part of the AI boom. And there is so much stuff that goes into the, I guess you could call it the AI value chain. For me, when I was in investment, it was sort of looking at the actual hardware, the actual the infrastructure, I guess you can call it the infrastructure layer, but then there's actually like all the software behind it too. I'm going to do a full video breaking that down. Anyways, coming back to this, hyperscale AI data centers. The race for AI supremacy has supercharged data centers, hyperscale AI data centers, powerful computer chips into synchronized clusters that work like giant high-speed supercomputers, sizzling hot, power-hungry behemoths pushing infrastructure to its limits. Okay, so how does this work? You have clusters of something called GPUs, which are connected through very or ultra high speed networks, and they are supplied with enormous amounts of electricity and cooling to train and run frontier AI models. Okay, so based on actual like experience in the investment world, one thing I could tell you is that there's sort of two angles you could go about here. There is two really interesting things you can look at. There's the cooling aspect, which is so like data centers, just because of the amount of energy they require and use, they need like efficient cooling systems, because if stuff overheats it starts to break down. The easiest cooling technology is to just use like a water cooler, but there's so much more sophisticated things you can do. So for example, as a project, what if you build out maybe some sort of AI tool that can make, like basically look inside the data center, see where the temperature's rising, then just send an instruction back to like a tablet or dashboard to tell the operator, hey, we're at risk of overheating here, we're just going to attenuate or reduce the temperature. That's one example. Now the whole bigger thing is sort of supplying energy into data centers, and you've seen like really like big tech companies, I think Google, Amazon, make investments into their own energy infrastructure to supply energy to their data centers. This sort of relates to a political angle as well, because you've gotten a lot of protests from local communities saying, hey, our local government is signing off on these contracts to supply energy to data centers, and we're going to be affected because we won't get enough electricity to power our homes and businesses. So this is a really interesting space. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but I do think it's something worthy of breaking down as well. This was just a very rough video. It's literally because I came across this article and I thought I might as well share this with you guys. There is so many more things I wanted to touch on in this video in my notes, especially with the biotech and artificial intelligence angle, but I don't want to be here for 3 hours. So follow the page for more content like this. Also check out our website to join our AI Startup Accelerator program, and we'll see you in the next one.